I'm Latricia Jackson.
And I'm Fanico Glover Jr. And today's event is called Brunch and Ballots, sponsored by King County Equity Now. Today's event, we're here to educate our community members on different things that's happening in the city. Right now, we have elections that's coming up for the 2025 year. We want to make sure that everybody is an informed voter. So today, we're bringing this opportunity to hear directly from the candidates on different policies that they want to push forward to make sure that we have a voice and being heard here in Seattle and King County.
We want to thank all of our sponsors and, of course, you, the viewer, for coming. Hope you enjoy.
It's a beautiful day out, and
thank you. Thank you for joining. So I think how we can go ahead and get started. Tell the folks who you are, why you're ready, what you do as our potential representative.
yeah, so I lived in Seattle for over 20 years and moved here with my husband in 2004. Seattle was a very different city then, as you might remember. We moved here, were able to find a room to rent for $400 a month. So that was those times. So I've really watched the city transform over the last 20 years, and there's been a lot of good things about that, but also Seattle has become a city that's just so hard to afford for youth, for elders, for working families, and obviously that's hit the Black community especially hard, and it has been for decades. I spent the last 14 years here in Seattle in our region as a community organizer and a coalition builder, winning transformative policies that benefit working families across our region every single day. Whether that's supporting young people at Rainier Beach High School who successfully won free transit, a victory that's now spread across Washington State, or building a community coalition in the city of Tooele that won the highest minimum wage in the country in 2022. So the reason I'm running for mayor now is because I believe that in this moment, that is the best way that I can advance the same aims that I've been working for my whole career, and that is helping to create a space for ordinary people who often feel left out of the decision-making processes that affect our lives, to have a voice, to have a seat at the table, to actually build power. And that's what I hope to do if I'm successful in the spaces there.
Awesome. Well, it sounds super fantastic. Looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better. We got a couple questions that we want to ask, and then hopefully the audience will chime in. So, the first question that we have is, Black families have been systematically pushed out of Seattle. As mayor, what executive action would you take in your first 100 days to begin addressing the wealth divide and create pathways for Black families to build generational welfare in Seattle?
Yeah, this is a great question, and obviously we have this long history in Seattle that goes back to redlining, and then we've had decades of displacement as those historically Black neighborhoods have started to gentrify, and that is absolutely something that the city needs to step up and take a leadership role in stopping and reversing those trends. So I think in the first 100 days, what I would aim to do, so over the course of this campaign, I've begun conversations and learned a lot about some of the great work that's already going on on this, from affordable homeownership programs. Was really inspired to have a conversation the other day with Caleb with the Resource Equity Association, and he was talking about how they're about to do groundbreaking on a project where a homeowner is going to be able to build a ADU and a DOD on that property, and actually family members who were pushed out of Seattle are going to be able to come back, and live in this multi-generational living. And so that's the kind of work that I believe the city needs to be supporting. And so I started learning about some of the organizations doing that work to make homeownership affordable, to make folks who still own homes in Seattle to make that stable rate. But I also know that I don't know the full scope of the work that is happening. And so in my first 100 days, I would like to convene all the folks who are doing that good work and really dig in to make sure that my administration is knowledgeable and dig into what the city can do to expand our support for that. Because absolutely everyone deserves a place in the city, and affordable homeownership is a really important means of building intergenerational wealth.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Keep having some difficulties with the on button, but the Central District historically has belonged to the Black community. What specific land use and housing policies will you implement to reverse gentrification and support Black property ownership within such districts?
Yeah, so great question, and some of that goes back to organizations that are doing the work already to increase community ownership of land and property, and then individual ownership in the Black community. And been privileged to talk a couple times with Black King folks after the town. The work that they're doing is really important on this score. In terms of like land use, I think prioritizing land that the city owned or where the city or another governmental entity has an interest in that land, if we can make sure that we are prioritizing that for community uses, I think that's going to be really important. And then all of the means to stabilize Black homeownership and try to make sure that basically homeownership, advancing homeownership models that make it more affordable, right? And I know that HomeSite is doing some really good work on this, and other organizations that are figuring out models of like limited equity, like equity co-ops and other models, which basically are going to make homeownership more affordable to middle income folks, because we know that over half of Seattle's renters, and in the Black community it's like 78% or something like that, right? So how are we creating those pathways to homeownership for folks who are currently renting, as well as making renting stable? Because I'm a renter myself, and so I also believe it's really important to know that like renters deserve stability, right? And there are a lot of us who are going to be renters our whole lives, and that should also be a dignified and stable life where we're able to raise children and thrive in Seattle.
Awesome. So Mayor Harrell proposed intentions for local reparation investments. How do you support that?
I do, and I know the mayor has said on this one debate stage that I don't. That's not true. I think the proposal is a little light on details so far, and so I've been having a number of conversations with different folks and organizations in the Black community operations, and absolutely committed to that. But I also realize that there's a diversity of opinions about like how that should work, and so I just want to make sure that as we're designing the program for Seattle, that we're being mindful of that, and but yeah, absolutely support.
Awesome. So now the follow-up question is, so how will you move from talking about those into making more actionable reparations for the Seattle Black community? Like what specific funding sources and programs would you establish for your administration to support African Americans here in Seattle?
Yeah, great question. And I also know that there's been some really important work going on at the state level on this, right? So there's a study of reparations at the state level, and then there's the covenant homeownership program, which I think is really great. And I was here, listening to last crew and heard them saying that, even with that down payment assistance, right, or your home in Seattle is so out of reach. So what can we do here in Seattle to unlock that? So I think that's going to be really important and could potentially be a good use of those funds. And I think, what I want to do is really, I think it's also just important that I know that I don't yet have this full understanding of the legal basis of reparations and how that plays out in Seattle, and is the focus on redlining, or are we focusing on descendants of enslaved people? So just really making sure that we have a solid legal basis for whatever we're doing, and then bringing together the various folks in the communities who are working on this and coming up with that plan that's going to have the greatest impact here in Seattle for affected families. I think would be the way forward.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, so gun violence disproportionately affects young Black men. Beyond and aside from policing, what community-based violence prevention and intervention programs would you fund and scale to protect the youth?
Yeah, I think this is so important, and I've been talking with a number of folks in Seattle who personally have been impacted by gun violence, and it's just clear that when you lose a family member to gun violence, that just has such devastating impacts on the family and on the whole community, and like goes generation by generation. So this is absolutely something that we need to do better on. And I know that there's a lot of great organizations that are doing violence interruption work and other violence prevention work in Seattle, and I think that those organizations are absolutely the right partners to have at the table. And then at the same time, there was a recent audit which suggested that the overall city's approach to gun violence is not like kind of strategic or evidence-based. And so that is troubling. And so I think what that means is that there needs to be there needs to be a different kind of city leadership in bringing together all of those organizations, making sure that we know what each organization is really best suited to, and then kind of co-creating a model for gun violence prevention that really is like leading toward results. And we have some good models. I know that Boston and Baltimore are two cities where recently they've seen really dramatic reductions in gun violence and especially gun violence. And so I think we should really make sure that we're learning lessons from those cities. And again, bringing everyone together and coming up with a plan to do better.
All right, great. So the last question that we have is, the city has proposed $1 billion levy for housing and transportation. Yet Black developers and contractors and businesses have been excluded from these opportunities. Do you support establishing a $1 billion anti-displacement fund specifically targeting Black community development? And how would you structure it if you were to support it?
Yeah, so you mean to say that again, establish $1 billion
anti-displacement fund specifically targeted at the Black community around Black community?
I do support that. And is this what I know that in KCEN's platform there's kind of a public-private $1 billion kind of reparations fund? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. No. I mean, I do support that, and I think it's going to be a matter of figuring out what are the funding sources for that, right? And how are we bringing the private sector in to do their part? And how are we working with different levels of government, with the county, state, to kind of realize that vision? And obviously, right now we have a large budget deficit in the city, and I know other levels of government do too. So this is going to be a challenge, but I think it's something that we need to do. I've done a lot of work over the years on progressive revenue. How can we raise more money, not by taxing working poor people who are already paying too much, but by requiring the wealthy to pay more like their fair share? And so I'm going to continue that work. And I think this also speaks to, I think I didn't directly answer from your earlier question about reparations and how we're going to fund that. Because one of the things about Mayor Harrell's proposal is that he didn't propose a funding source. So he's basically assuming that we're just going to take some money from elsewhere in the budget without identifying where that is. So just to say, like, we definitely have work to do on the funding sources of that. But I think it's important.
Awesome. Thank you.
Brenda, I don't know if we have time for this call. Yeah? Or if you want to open it up to the audience. Yeah? Okay. So, as Black youth employment remains high, what specific programs would you implement to create economic opportunities for Black youth in Seattle?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think there's a few things. So, in general, not just youth once they get to the age where they work, but I think just like the whole arc of a child's life is so important in giving people the opportunity to get off on a good track. And I'm the mother of a toddler, and the cost of childcare in our city is just out of control, right? And so I really want to figure out a way that the city can create that roadmap of like, what do we need? What do we need for young families with children to help them succeed? What do we need as children get into school age? And one of the things that I started talking about is free summer care for youth, right? Because for school age children, right? Because when you're a working parent and the school year ends, and now what are you supposed to do with your 8-year-old, with your 9-year-old, right? And so how can we, maybe through our community centers, right? How can we create those opportunities for children to have somewhere to go in the summer? And then I think once kids get into the age where they might be able to work, right? I think having opportunities for paid employment that can be through city programs, and I think the city should actually do more of that than we do now, but what are those ways that the city can directly provide employment opportunities for youth so that they're both contributing to the community and also being able to make that money? Very much supportive of like mentorship and apprenticeship programs. And I know that the city already does some good work on that, so I'd like to figure out how we can continue to support that and expand that, create those career pathways into good jobs, especially good union jobs in our community for our youth.
Awesome. And I got a follow-up question to that. So I would ask, and this is the last question I'm going to have for you. How would your administration deliver better economic outcomes for Black residents versus
So, I mean, I think that housing affordability is at the core of this, right? Because if you're spending 50, 60% or more of your income on your housing costs every month, then how are you supposed to live here, right? And especially if you have childcare costs as well. And so the more that we can do to tackle the affordability crisis for everyone, but then specifically the Black community, the better off that we will be. And I also think that this goes to, I mean, just thinking about creating like opportunities for youth. Like one thing that I've heard is just like our community centers, like Rainier Beach Community Center is awesome, and also programs you have to like make money to, you get small amounts of money, but that could be a barrier for you, right? And so how can we reduce or eliminate those barriers so that you have an opportunity to have that third place where they can go and have activities and meeting and community that doesn't cost money. So I think that's really important. And that helps the whole family, right? You have economic opportunity. And obviously jobs, right? So the more that we can have good job opportunities here in Seattle and make sure that we're finding the ways to make those available to the folks who need those jobs the most, I think that's going to be really important as well.
Awesome, thank you.
We're gonna transition over to the lightning round. We'll actually got some questions so we can ask, but some of them are good.
Ask for it. Make sure we do it for the cameras.
Is your microphone?
Do you?
Yeah.
I got it. I checked. Okay, so I think some of it answered, but we'll do it for the record. Do you support disaggregating data on descendants of American chattel slavery so that we can understand how our community that has been here for 140 years is actually doing this in this Do you support reparations for descendants of our chattel slavery that have endured decades of anti-Black policies and practices in Seattle? Do you support establishment of a $1 billion comparative development fund financed by public and private sectors to support affordable housing, business development, workforce training as a means of addressing economic and social impacts of systemic racism and historical traumas? Do you support Black community having control over the resources that are supposed to impact our lives? Do you support significantly increasing opportunities for young people to earn money? Will you prioritize funding for shovel-ready, community-led affordable housing projects in communities such as the former Mayoral Center and affordable homeownership projects that are ready to go in the city? All right, that is all for lightning round. So maybe we can take 2 questions from the community.
2?
Have one on.
2?
I don't right here.
There's one question. I have my 4. I do.
Okay, so that's 2. Well,
This is the opportunity to ask the question.
Okay, so my understanding is that you have a background in journalism, I also understand your background in housing and working for affordable housing. So it's so important to have class analysis when you're doing that work. But it's also, we're talking about Black folks, so it's really important to have race analysis as we do the work, which is a very deep thing to understand. You can't bone up on that homework, get that in 4 or 5 months. It's a lifetime of work. And especially in Seattle, because it's so nuanced here, and such a nice, polite way of staffing. Basically, the way to play so you don't feel until the blood is running. And so I want to understand how you would, if you were elected, ensure that your administration has that analysis of racism, how you would address it, because I have, in terms of some of the ways that our trauma, we talk about reparations, it's just financial, it is not. We are traumatized all day long, and sometimes that can return on one another. And oftentimes the media has used our trauma in a way that really weaponizes our community to their benefit. I've seen that in their election. It's really preying on some of the deep pain that's going on in our community around some of the things that have happened, even our relationships. Our power is in our relationships. And I think that if we don't have a good race analysis, we can be used, we can be picked out, we can be plucked out, we can decorate with Facebook color, and yet we, because of our trauma, will make sure that everything is nice and paved and nice for white folks, but we'll turn on our own. That's our trauma. That's understanding how racism works. And so it's hard to have really frank conversations when we haven't been in a relationship. Maybe we've done some things around the general population in terms of poverty, but really understanding the insidious nature of racism is critical. And we cannot get played against each other. We can't do it. And we have to support our own. Even around the policies and everything else, the policies is fine. But when all is said and done, white folks have a big bag and we're still scrapping. So I would like to know what you're going to do to ensure that you have a clear analysis. Maybe you do. If you do, can you explain it, and what you do to ensure that your administration will have that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess what I'll say is that, in the work that I've done over the years, I know some people, and I know very well that I don't know everyone, and that I don't know all of the complexities in the Black community, which is absolutely not wrong, right? That is something that has been to me very clearly in the course of this campaign. And I guess what I would say is that I think I'm a pretty good listener. And my commitment is to listen, to continue to listen, and to continue to build relationships, because I know that takes time, and I know that trust isn't built overnight. And as I'm building my administration, I'm going to make sure that we are bringing people together who both have a race-class analysis, who understand the relationship between racism and our country's history, and who also are here to listen and to learn. And yeah, so I think that again, I know that I don't know, and that I might make missteps, right? And I'm very willing to learn from the missteps that I make. And I want to make sure that in the work that we're doing, you're not pitting people against each other. And that we are getting the best outcomes that we can. And I want all of you to be partners in that. No, I do have a race analysis.
So what is it?
I'm not sure I can explain it in a minute, but our history, our country was founded on slavery, was founded on the exploitation of Black people, brought here against their will, and that history goes on to this day. That history infects everything, right, in our country, and racism continues, structural racism continues, and then that is also bound up with all of the other ways that people have been oppressed in our history, right?
I think it's also the analysis, even in this election, if Mel talk about how Black folks and how people of color are impacted negatively, but how white people live it up in firms, that's what those invisible lives. So you even see it, not just in elections, you see it probably driving. You see it when you get up in the morning, you see it when you go to work, you see it all day long, everything. And so the analysis is not just the analyzing us, it's really the analyzing you.
So it would be, so I think there's a proposal on the table basically is asking you to produce that prior to folks turning in the ballot. They would like to see it. I would like to see it and understand it along with I have another proposal. Because going from such a small budget to a large budget, it would be good to see what a mock budget would look like for you, and understanding the magnitude of how much you have to deal with. So that's another proposal. My question is, prior to the election, which what tables or who were you walking side by side with who was working to either create Black brilliance or dismantle any of the policies that directly affect the Black community?
Prior to the election.
Prior to you
Running for office, yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say, as you've heard, I'm sure, no doubt, many times during this campaign, in 2020, I was part of the Solidarity Budget Coalition, which was, had a bunch of proposals for what true community safety would look like and what investing in community as opposed to focusing on over-policing would look like. And a lot of that work was led by folks in the Black community. And I and the organization that, I think the Transparency Union, we were partnered in that coalition.
What were some names?
Latanya, and Nikita was involved in that too. I mean, going back much further, I mentioned the work that I and the Transparency Union did with folks at Lakewood Beach High School, right? Those were young women of color at Beach High School doing that work. WABLA and Lakewood Beach Action Coalition were partners in that work. And again, I'm not here to claim that I know everyone, right? Like, I've done work on certain issues and built relationships in the course of that work, but I know that I have a long way to go in building relationships in the Black community, and I have committed to doing that work.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the crowd?
Yes. Hi, my name is Margaret Jones. I'm former board chair of Appleton Community Land Trust, legacy homeowner, business owner in Central Seattle. My business is in the corridor of the Mount Baker corridor down by the pipeline. Wanted to ask a question about, I'm sure you drove up and down Rainier Avenue. Small business there, that we are being affected by the transit, the homeless population, the drug population, and just crime in general down in that corridor. I want to know, they have like some programs that are currently for people if you have vandalization, if your windows are broken and all this kind of stuff. They're all reimbursable kind of grants. We need something in protection right now before something happens. So as a small business owner, asking you, what, if you were elected, what are you going to do to support small businesses, crime in that area, not just there, because I have like 3 or 4 questions, so I'm going to try to put them on online. But, so the crime in that area, and then the crime in our city in general, I'm sure you may answer this, but in regards to the Trump administration coming with ICE, all these different kinds of things and threats that we have to our city right now. We need someone who is strong, that can stand up to Trump, that can stand up to all the things that we have coming here in the city. I want to know, what is your plan for that? And what is your plan for the small businesses being affected in Mount Baker and all around the city?
Yeah, thank you. And this is, your experience is echoed in the conversations that I've been having with small business owners and neighborhoods around the city. The homelessness and the aspects of the public safety crisis that are related to homelessness are huge issues for many small business owners. And honestly, this is one of the reasons why I got into this race, because I've been so disappointed with the current administration's approach to the homelessness crisis, which basically amounts to sweeping people around the city without meaningful offers of shelter and support. And what we've seen is that destabilizes people and it makes them more likely to behave in ways that contribute to our public safety crisis. So it would be a very high priority for my administration to expand emergency housing and shelters so that we can actually begin to get people inside with the support that they need to be successful there, instead of inherently sweeping them around. So that is part of it. And then obviously there's also a law enforcement and policing aspect to this. My team has talked to a lot of officers and former officers. We used to have more of a community policing model in Seattle, which seems to have been successful. And so moving back toward that model, where you have our officers who are on the full time, out of the neighborhoods, building relationships with small business owners, able to take that kind of problem-solving approach to public safety problems in the neighborhood. So that's an answer on one part of your question.
I need to hear how you support the small business.
Okay. Can I keep answering?
One second.
Yeah. So what you mentioned about reimbursable grants, this is something I've heard a number of people telling me that's a problem. So I don't know what like the legal framework is, like whether we can do grants that are upfront instead of reimbursable, but that's absolutely something that I will look at because I understand that that's a challenge. I also think that the city can do, and we have some good programs to support small businesses. I think there's more we can do to make it easier to start and expand a small business. And if there are things that we can do for example, with kind of the permitting processes and all the different agencies, levels of government that you have to interface with as a small business to make all of that simpler and also less expensive, then absolutely on point for helping to make that happen. I'm going to continue the conversations with small business owners that I've been having during this campaign. I think creating like a standing advisory group of small business owners and continuing to do that outreach so that we're really understanding at a level of detail the challenges that people are facing and figuring out together what we can do to make it easier to operate. So,
I like some of the small business owners that you've been talking to, and were any of them of color?
yes, lots of them have been the business owners. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Katie, for joining us today. Everyone, please give her a round of applause.